Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the Deal Quest podcast. Let's get started. Steve Preda is an entrepreneur, investment banker, and business coach, helping good companies become great and buyable. I am so excited to have Steve on the Deal Quest podcast. Steve, welcome.
Hey, Corey, nice to be here.
Well, listen, buyable, that's a great word right on the Deals podcast. And before we get more into exactly how you do that and what you're doing now, I want to take you back to when you were growing up as a little kid, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because my guess is investment banking and business coach and making the businesses viable probably wasn't it back then, but you tell me.
That's a great question. So I actually do have a very distinct memory when I was 10 years old. And I remember it was the summer, I was a little boy and I was in my grandparents' vacation home. And I remember one evening I was walking around the house and I was kind of singing a song, "We Shall Overcome." I was singing that. And I was thinking about, what I would like to be. And there were two thoughts I had. It wasn't crystallized, but one was that I had heard stories of my great-grandfather, who was a very successful entrepreneur in pre-war Budapest. He had the chain of bakeries. He was one of the top 30 taxpayers in Budapest. So I was really mesmerized by these stories about his rags to riches success. And the second thing I knew was that I wanted to be on the move. So I visualized myself as being traveling. And of course, that was a big thing because I was behind the Iron Curtain. So everyone wanted to travel. But I saw myself as doing some kind of an international work where I would be traveling from places and meet a lot of people. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. But that was kind of my thing from my childhood.
I love it. Great story. One other question looking back, what was your first deal of any type? It could have been something when you were a little kid or early in your career, whatever comes to mind that, was an early deal.
Well, it's a very small one, but I was still in elementary school. And I remember that there was this little candy bars called Pez candy bars, and they became really popular, but they were not available only in a couple of shops around town. And I figured out where they were for sale. And every morning I went there and I bought a bunch of them. And then I sold it with a high markup in my class. And that was my kind of first deal that I did. And it was very lucrative for a few weeks until other people caught on.
I love it. A little resale deal there until the market caught up with you. Huh? Great. Okay, so let's jump to what you're doing now. And you say investment banker. People generally understand what that is. You say business coach, and then having companies become good to great and viable. So, but give us a little more detail exactly. Who are the kind of companies you work with? What do you exactly do to help them go from good to great and become viable?
So the last 20 years, I've been working almost exclusively with small to medium-sized businesses. So typically 10 to 250 employee businesses. Yep. And I ran an investment banking business between 2002 and 2012 in Hungary and Romania. We also had an office. And basically, we were helping small business owners to position their businesses for sale, and then we helped with the transaction. We found the investor and helped with the transaction. And I really loved that work. What I really loved is the impact we were making with these companies. We were helping these people to actually realize something for their hard work. I really loved that. I loved the deal making and the negotiation and the excitement of the deal, and obviously a lot of disappointments as well, but a lot of exciting success. So that was kind of the first 10 years of the last 20. And then we moved over here to the US, and I started doing a little bit of investment banking, but then I transitioned to coaching. the reason I transitioned was primarily because my wife said that it's enough about the deal making. It's too risky. I want a stable paycheck. Bring me money every month. So I started dabbling in coaching. And then I actually realized that I really enjoyed coaching. And what I liked about it was that it was much more rewarding on a day-to-day basis. So with the deal making, when we hit the jackpot, it was very rewarding, both financially as well as for the client. But there was also a lot of tension with the client, obviously with the buyers, and sometimes the clients got greedy, and even if we did a good job, they were not happy, and sometimes they changed their minds. It was a very stressful job. With coaching, what I really loved was that I can help the company get better, and it's always a rewarding experience, unless they don't execute, in which case we fire each other, and that's fine.
Sure.
Now, one more thing I'd like to share here. So one of the things that I also realized when I became a business coach was that I inadvertently let down some of my clients because sometimes we sold their businesses too early. If I had known what I know now, I could have helped them increase the value of the business, and we could have gotten a much better payout for them. But I didn't know it, and I was in the business of selling businesses, so I basically just pushed them. And I feel like I could have done a better job for them if I helped them grow the business a little bit more before they sold.
Yeah, in hindsight, that's a great, it's a great observation. And, what's interesting to me, obviously, listen, Steve, there are a huge number of business coaches out there, right? And they come from different angles. And I've used business coaches, right? I believe in business coaches. However, anybody can say this, they're a business coach, right? There's no, yes, there are certifications out there, whatever, but everybody, and they bring different things. And I'm not denigrating anybody. But what I like in the context of at least this podcast is that a lot of coaches I know, they'll work on, the individual executives and maybe some of their own limiting beliefs and breakthroughs, which I've had great help with coaches with. A lot of them come from the sales side of things, to help, sales and marketing promotion, which is also very valuable. But a lot few of them come from a background that understand deals, that understand M&A, and understand actually having that other way to build value. Obviously, the more customers and clients you have, the more revenue you get, that builds value as well. But there are additional ways to build value. So I'd love you to talk about how that background, in investment banking and your understanding of deals applies and helps you in terms of how you coach your clients.
So basically, I am still wearing my investment banker hat a little bit in this coaching relationship. So as you said, there are different coaches. They come in all different shapes and sizes. There are executive coaches who focus on working with executives. There are leadership team coaches who work with groups of people. And there are entrepreneur coaches. There are life coaches, obviously. And then there are coaches who focus on culture primarily, and there are coaches who focus on numbers. So I come from, started life at KPMG as an accountant, and then I went to banking and went to investment banking. So I kind of started from the numbers side and gradually moved over to the human side, to the people side. 20 years ago, I was really excited about financial models. Today, I'm no longer excited about financial models, but I'm really excited about people being driven by a powerful purpose and figuring out where they want to take this company, how they energize the people around them, and how they create a good execution framework. I'm very excited about. And I'm also thinking about how to make this company buyable in the process. So that's why my book is titled Buyable. And the subtitle is how to create a self-managing, fast-growing, and high-profit business. So this is kind of what I'm focusing on. Make the business self-managing, so that you don't have to do the heavy lifting as the entrepreneur. You can stay at the strategic level. You've got a team that executes. You've got a vision that is beyond your life cycle. So the company has its own story that it is pursuing. And then you want it to grow, because if you don't grow the business, you're not attracting the right people. Because the good people, they want to build a great career. They want to grow themselves fast. And that only happens if the business is growing. And ultimately, you want to be high profit. So you want to be at the elite level in your industry, the top 15% of your industry that makes 90% of the profits of the whole industry. You want to be there. So you want to figure out what is that level of profitability. You have to engineer your business and then sustain that level of profitability. So that's what I focus on. And, that's my brand of coaching, but obviously it's not the only one, and it's not necessarily the best one.
I love it because, So I've been involved with Entrepreneurs Organization for 13 years, whatever. I was president of the New York chapter, and for a couple of years, back in the mid teens, and in that community and in the entrepreneurial community in general, Michael Gerber's E-Myth is like a Bible, right? And that's and it's similar to some of the things you're talking about. Gerber hates when you reduce his book down to work on your business, not in your business, but that is one of the principles. And it is the holy grail for a lot of entrepreneurs to say, that first of all, just for their own lifestyle and whatever, not to have to work day and night, but also they understand in building enterprise value, right, that the less dependent the business is on them, the more valuable it is, and the less. Most entrepreneurs don't want to get locked into a 5-year employment agreement after they sell. And, you can only avoid that if you're not as crucial to the business at the time you sell, right? So let's talk about some of the ways you work with folks. Like what are the things that companies have to do to become viable? And correspondingly, what are some of the mistakes that people make that have them be less attractive?
What I also am got very excited. And the reason I chose the brand of coaching I'm doing is because I read the E-Myth back in the mid-2000s, and I implemented it in my business, and it really helped us grow. And then I read Traction, and I implemented Traction, and that took us to the next level. And I call both the E-Myth and Traction, I call them business operating systems, or I call them management blueprints. So they are basically a framework that helps you simplify things. So as a small company, you can't afford Harvard MBAs doing management and strategy for you, right? You have to have a cookie cutter way of doing this on the cheap, essentially doing it yourself or with a facilitator, with a coach like me in a much more affordable and simplified way. So I'm really obsessed by this idea. There are 1.7 million of these small businesses, 10 to 250 employee businesses in the US, and 85% of them go out of business in 10 years. Mm-hmm. So essentially, we are losing a lot of businesses. And the reason these businesses are lost because they don't know how to organize themselves. They don't know how to set goals, how to build a team, how to execute. And if they had a coach who would help them with them, they would all survive. And I did a back of the envelope calculation. It would actually it would bump up our GDP in the US by 20%, and it would add to the annual growth rate by another 4% per annum. So we would be running circles around China in terms of growth. So this is a huge opportunity. So what I do is I use these management blueprints. This is my podcast is also called Management Blueprint. So the E-Myth, Traction, EOS, scaling up, 4 disciplines of execution, 5 game of gear business. And there are many more. So we are just recording the 90th episode, and there's no repeat. There's so many frameworks out there. So what I do is I work with businesses and I put together for them a customized framework to grow their business. It's their own operating system. And the framework I use, kind of the overarching framework, is called Pinnacle. So how do you take the company to the pinnacle? And there are 5 pinnacle principles that we work around. And the first one is people. So, right people in the right seats. And how do you coach your A potentials to become A players? Yep. How do you keep your A players by giving them more opportunities? Then the second principle is purpose. So it's all about vision, strategy, and alignment. Yep. So where are you going? How are you going to get there? And make sure that everyone is rowing the same direction in the organization. The third principle is called performance. So performance is all about setting goals, setting quarterly rocks, having metrics for everyone, having a meeting cadence so that everyone is executing the vision and the plan. Yep. The fourth pinnacle principle is playbooks. So we are documenting, we are defining and ingraining our processes, our unique way of doing business, and we are constantly optimizing it so that we are refining our playbooks. And the fifth principle, so if you do the first 4 principles, so you got the right people, purpose, performance, and playbooks. If you do this right, you already are a fairly profitable organization. But then the fifth one is profit. So we benchmark ourselves. What are the elite players doing? And how do we engineer the business? And how do we sustain with a set of strategies? How do we sustain our top of the industry profitability? So that's the journey I'm taking my clients on, and
love it.
And I'm very pumped about it.
Well, okay. So now, and you've mentioned so many things that in the entrepreneurial community, traction, all these, right, the EOS, right, scaling up. I mean, these are all, again, around the EO and other entrepreneurial community. Everybody, wants to implement these things. And, you see some folks who really do, right? And then others who don't. They read the books, they try it, they whatever. There's several books. I think Godin had a book called The Dip. I'm a fan of, there's another book that talks about the different stages of growth. It'll come to me in a second. And, and very often, and most people I believe that, you get to a point, well, so first of all, you get to a point where, the way you did it now won't get you, what got you here won't get you there, right? And then you also often get to a point where you actually have to reinvest in the company in a way that may temporarily, right, have you make less profit, right? Because you're you're hiring key people, you're putting systems in place, whatever, and you go into this trough or this dip, the
no man's land,
and then
yes.
You can go to the next. So, talk to me about, one of the things I'm really interested in, because we can talk about the execution but what is it about the entrepreneur? Because I often talk about the mindset of a deal maker, right? Or the mindset of an entrepreneur, because we all know in these smaller, medium-sized companies, it's very often the founder or founders that are going to govern whether this thing really, follows your advice and goes to the next level or doesn't. So what's the difference in whether it's mindset or whatever it is between the ones that do get past that dip and go to that next level and the ones that never get there?
Well, it is a mindset. Really, it's about the growth mindset.
Yeah.
So what are you in? And that's when it comes back to, why are you in business in the first place?
Yeah.
So did you just buy yourself a job? I mean, often franchisees, this is what they do. They buy themselves a job. They got fired in corporate America. They got bruised and said, okay, I'm going to buy myself a job where I cannot be fired. Yep. And that's a franchise opportunity. And that becomes a lifestyle business.
Yep.
So are you in the business of just having a lifestyle business, which is completely fine? This is nothing wrong with this. But are you just basically just want to have a stable thing where you got a stable income, you have a good skill that you can sell, and you can have a decent lifestyle, you're not killing yourself growing? Or do you want to grow a business? And if you want to grow the business, why do you want to grow the business? Is this because it's self-actualization for you to actually build a business? You're excited about getting out of bed every day to how to grow this business and surpass competitors or solve a big problem? Or is it because you want an exit because you are chasing a lifestyle for which you need a lot of money? And again, both are fine, but figure out what you want to do. And if you want to grow, then you have to recognize that when a company grows, it only grows to the extent that the leadership team is able to grow.
Yes.
So if you want to take this company from 10 million to 50 million, guess what? I always tell my clients, you guys have to become 5 times more effective. So those of you who can do that, they are going to go with that company. If you can't do that, then you're going to have to move sideways. You won't be able to take this company. So that's the first idea. So so the right mindset is, I am a person that I want to grow. I'm willing to grow to the extent I want the company to grow. I know why I'm doing this. I have real clear objectives. So I'm willing to pay the price of growth, there can be growing pains, as we all know. Mm-hmm. So I have a strong motivation. I'm not there in the company because I want people around me to surround me people that eat from my hand and think I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's not what I'm pursuing. I want to grow this business. And if I want to grow this business, then I recognize that I have to grow myself, which means I have to get out of the way. I have to elevate myself and do the stuff that I'm really good at and which helps grow, and empower the people who will run the execution, the day-to-day of the business. Yeah. So that's kind of mindset. And I'm always mining for this when I'm talking about with potential clients. I try to figure out, because if they don't have it, then it's going to be a disappointing experience for both of us. And I don't want that. I mean, I want to walk out of this meeting every time energized and inspired myself, because then I can take this to all my other clients. If someone drains my energy because they are not executing, that's bad for them. That's bad for me too. Yeah. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but
No. I think it's right on. And the other resource that I was drawing a blank on for a moment was Les McEwen's book, Predictable Success. which I'm a fan of. He talks about the stages of a business where in the beginning you have the struggle just to build it, and then it gets to a point where it's fun, right? Maybe you've got yourself as the visionary, you got an operator, right? Usually a visionary needs an operator. He talks about, right, somebody's who helps execute for the visionary, and you have this nice maybe lifestyle business, and it becomes fun. You're not worried about you can eat, you can pay the bills, and then though either you are going to stay in that phase, which is actually hard to do because of different marketing, or if you continue to grow, you're going to hit a stage that he calls whitewater before you get to predictable success, before you get the systems in place and the right team in place and the people in the seats of the bus. You go through this whitewater period where everything you've done doesn't work, and you got to upgrade maybe some of your people and your systems, and things are breaking down because the growth has exceeded your systems. So I'm a fan of Les's work in that way because I've seen it. And listen, and you also said something that was interesting, like all these basic operating systems, whether it's traction or scaling up or whatever. Or I had a personal experience recently. I was a big fan. I've had Mike McCullough on the podcast a couple of times, and he has Profit First, right? And Profit First also became a Bible for me on the way I do my fundamental money and put money aside for taxes and owners pay and owners, but recently I've hired a CFO service, right? Full, like the real CFO service beyond, what I used to have in the accounting, whatever, who was giving me a much more sophisticated, right? So we're looking at Profit First, not that I'm a fan. You should read Profit First, listeners. If you haven't done it and you don't apply in your business, it's a phenomenal book. But I like the way you said you have these operating systems because, it's sort of a simplified way because you don't have the kind of advice and consultants and high level people and whatever. And I've seen now when I've stepped up that I'm getting, very sophisticated analyses, and we're going to redo, how we approach Profit First because I have a much higher level of capability. And that's what's, again, continued to, have me to grow. But, that's an investment, right? I just made an investment in another senior attorney. We're adding hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, right, in expenses. And not everybody's willing to take that risk and make that jump, right? Because, you often have to invest in advance. Like just the way most businesses work, it's very rare that you get the full revenue first before you make the investments that's going to bring it. You got to take a leap of faith at some point. I love this conversation and what you help people do.
I totally agree. And Profit First is a great idea. It's basically what our grandparents used to do. They would put money in different cookie jars, to make sure that there's money left over for vacations and for the new car and for the teaching of the kids.
My parents did that when I was growing up.
Yeah. That's right. So it's basically the same thing right now with bank accounts. It's the same idea, but that's definitely a big blind spot for entrepreneurs. And we like to say it this way. Mike Michalovitz actually says this way, that the traditional accounting is revenue minus expenses is profit. So that's GAAP accounting. And then you have Profit First is revenue minus profit equals expenses.
Right.
But I would also add that entrepreneurs don't really follow that. It's a hard one to follow. Entrepreneurs, basically, they follow their passion often. So they want to get something accomplished, and then they put themselves in a position where basically it's a gun to the head, and I have to do it, and they figure it out how they do it. So they don't do it by putting the money aside. They don't put the money aside. They invest the money, and then they just drive themselves crazy. It's like Elon Musk sleeping under his desk. He's a billionaire, but he's willing to sleep under this desk weeks on end to make sure that the operation is figured out, and the Teslas manufacture 5,000 a week. And then he did that with SpaceX. I heard an interview recently that he was looking for a chief engineer, and they couldn't find a chief engineer who was good enough. And he turned himself into the chief engineer, and he figured out how to get this rocket not explode. So this is insane. This is what entrepreneurs do. They basically put themselves in a position where they can't afford to fail, and they somehow make it.
Listen, I've been there myself. I won't get into my stories early on about, going into paying my rent off credit card debts when paying my rent off credit cards and being in debt when I started my business. And then, and I've been there, more than once, but, when you get to the point where you're trying to create a viable business, where you're trying to create something that's viable, you gotta get to the point where you break some. I mean, you still want that commitment and passion. You still want that vision, but you got to break some of those habits, right, to be able to create a viable business.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness.
I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to CoreyKupfer.com/assessment. That's CoreyKupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show. Talk to me a little bit about, because one of the things, obviously, preparing to be viable, right? Scalable and saleable is often the way you hear it, is one thing, in terms of just doing that organically and creating the systems and teams to be able to be attractive for that ultimate deal, that ultimate exit. But another way to grow, and another way to grow for businesses is actually to do deals in the interim, right? Buy other companies, do strategic alliances, joint ventures, distribution agreements, whatever it is. And one of the fundamental premises of my podcast is that that's so underutilized for a lot of business. A lot of businesses bang their heads against the wall just trying to get more sales, more customers. And yes, you need to have organic growth. You need to know how to get a customer, another one, and another one. But very often there's some deal that could be done that could accelerate that growth. And if you look at the highest growth companies, there's all kinds of studies and whatever. None of them have done it all organically. They also do it through deals. So do you get involved in that with your clients in terms of, because you understand deals and looking, and helping them in terms of deal opportunities for growth while they still own the business?
Yes, I do get involved. So sometimes, but not as a principal deal maker. I get involved as their trusted advisor.
Yeah.
So when, for example, I have a client right now which is going through a merger process. They have, there's this buyer who approached them, and they are negotiating a sale, and I'm just helping them out and giving him some pointers, make sure that he keeps his eye on growing the business through the transaction, because it's so easy to get distracted. It's very sexy to deal with an M&A deal, especially on the sales side. It's you suddenly start to see the dollar signs, and you get distracted, and you drop the ball. Yep. So just focus on the business. But on the buy side, I do agree that, especially if you're in a mature industry and if you can roll up some other competitors, you have a good system where you can just plug people in. That's a fantastic leverage. And this is a great way to get great people in the company. It's also a great way to get products, get markets. And if you can do that, but it's a skill in itself. So I think The trick is that you have to really educate yourself. What does it take to do good deals, and then free yourself up? So first, you have to make sure that you have a great team that runs your day-to-day business, so you can focus your energy on finding those M&A opportunities and being engaged and put the value in there. So if you make the business self-managing, then you can start going after these M&A opportunities, and definitely they will increase your valuation because it's a bigger company, you have higher multiples. And then if you have an acquisition engine, then that gets factored into your growth, and your growth is going to be, you grow 15% organically, and then you grow another 20% acquisition. Then in the ultimate sale, you will be a 35% growth company and sold as one. So that's a huge value add as well.
Yeah, no question. And you said something quickly that I want to highlight, just because of the way the market is right now. You said you were listing off sort of the various reasons why you might, do an acquisition. And one of the things you said was talent, and it's interesting. I just want to highlight that a little bit, because a lot of people think of acquisitions to be able to get, just additional clients and scale or get into a geography. But but talent acquisition is huge, and especially in this market where I know many of my clients. I'm guessing many of your clients are having trouble, finding talent that they need. It's one thing, sure, you can do recruiting, but if you can buy a company that, I've seen deals that have done the main driver is getting the people.
And you cannot hire an entrepreneur. They are not for hire, but you can buy them, and they're going to be running the business maybe inside your umbrella. And if you can infect them with your growth and what you're doing, and you give them a bigger opportunity, and you can give them equity, then you have a good chance of tying them in and make them part of your entrepreneurial machine. And that's a huge coup if you can pull that off.
That's right. And then they may have a great team working for them. They may, you may be great at developing business, but you can't get the talent to do it. That person may have a great team, but maybe it's not growing as quickly. So, there's definitely opportunities there. So let's go back to your investment banking days for a moment and give me a couple of the, because I'm sure this impacts what you're doing now as well in terms of when people see these opportunities. Give me just a couple of the highlights and lowlights of the mistakes people have made, like, how people got good deals done, but also, what the classic mistakes that maybe people made in either not getting the deal done or actually getting the deal done and having it be a bad deal.
Yeah, so I like to mention two examples. So one is about getting a great deal done and getting a great deal done by getting prepared to have a great deal done. And I'd like to talk about two clients that I had. One was an entrepreneur who was 70 years old, and he realized that he had a medical diagnosis. He had to have an operation, and he approached us and basically told us that we had 9 months to sell his company. That's how much he can delay the operation, and he wants to make sure none of his family members are involved. He didn't really have a management team that he could sell to, so he wanted to make sure that his affairs were in order. Should anything go wrong, or should not be able to go back. And the company on the face of it was a great little gem. It was a relatively small company, about 5 million sales, but half of it fell to the bottom line. Yep. Very profitable. It was also a dominant in its niche. It was a 60% market share in its niche. So I said, wow, this is great. However, what we found out that there were some issues with the company. One was it has a huge customer concentration issue. So 80% of its revenue came from a single customer. It's a huge problem. The second was it had no second level management team. So basically the owner was making all the decisions. So there's no one that we could promote from the inside. And the books were not completely transparent. So what we figured out very early was that we could not get any institutional investors involved. Sure. Because these would be red flags for them. So we had to find a buy-in investor. And basically, we found one who was a retired CEO of a public company who was kind of itching to get back in the game, but the guy didn't have money. So we found an investor who was a company which was in the adult entertainment industry, but they wanted to kind of whitewash their reputation. They wanted to be in legit businesses as well. So they kind of were willing to invest without a very deep due diligence. So they gave the money. And we managed to close the deal in time, but the multiple was much lower. So the multiple was 4 times profit as opposed to 6 times, which it could have been. The other example, around the same time, we did this other deal, which was a consumer retail wholesale company, and they had everything buttoned down. So they were running on SAP. They had a second level leadership team empowered. They had a clear vision. The two of the founders had a clear idea of what they wanted to do after the acquisition, and they were clearly motivated. And basically, it was a very smooth process. We had a bidding war for the company. We sold it for 7 times multiple, and they could hand over the keys and were out the next day, and minimal indemnities. It's a great deal. And the difference was the preparation. Sure. So one realized about twice the value because they were well prepared. And number one could have realized a similar valuation if they put in the effort maybe 18, 24 months before getting prepared. So that's one of the stories. The other story I'd like to share is I had these 2 partners. They were running a construction business, and one was an industry insider person. The other was a politician. And they teamed up. They did this roll-up of civil engineering firms. And they built this company with a couple million, I think they had 4 or 5 million of EBITDA. And they said, wow, the market is super hot. It was around 2007. And let's go and sell this and make a bunch of money. So they hired me, and we went out, and we very quickly found buyers that were willing to pay a good multiple. And they signed an LOI. And then we thought we are, in the final stretch. We went into due diligence, and things started slowing down. It turned out that they were dragging their feet. The sellers were dragging their feet. So I went to them, guys, what's going on? And said, well, we got new contracts, and it looks like next year is going to be a bumper year, and we feel they're not going to sell it. It's too cheap. I said, okay, leave it with me. So I went to the buyer. I explained the situation. I told him, hey, we need to improve the terms. There won't be a deal. So they said, okay. So they were a French company. We flew to Paris. They wined and dined us for 2 days, but nevertheless, they managed to get them to increase the price by about 20%. So we were super excited. Went in, due diligence finished, went to negotiations. Again, things started slowing down. And I went to the couple of weeks in, I went to the sales, well, guys, what's going on? He says, well, we just acquired this other company and our backlog is still growing and we think we are still too cheap. I said, okay. So I went again to the buyers and it was much harder this time, but somehow they still agreed to bump up the price by 10%. So negotiations were winding down and we were close to Christmas now, late November, early December. And
of 2007.
It was 2007, and they agreed.
I'm listening to your story like there's a train coming right at me. I can see it. Okay,
that's right. So everything looked great, and they said they agreed to come to Budapest to do the closing and everything. And the agreement was that they would fly in the afternoon. We would agree the final terms, and next day we would sign the contracts, and then the closing would happen just right after the new year.
Yeah.
So that was a Friday. So the client arrived around midday, and they told me that they decided not to sell the business. What? Well, we think it's still there's so many opportunities next year, and unless they are willing to raise the price again, we're not going to sell it. So the buyers arrive a little bit later, and I break the news, and they are totally upset and despondent, and they turning around. They're going to take the next flight out. There were no more flights out this evening, so they were kind of stuck there. It actually was Thursday, not Friday. It was Thursday. There was no more flight. So I convinced them to go out for a drink. So we did that. Then we went for dinner. Then we went for more drinks. Went to a nightclub. Eventually, at 2:00 in the morning, I managed to get them to agree to a final deal on a piece of napkin, and I felt so powerful. It was the Michael Lewis investment bankers. What's the title of the book? I can't remember. Michael Lewis.
Liar's Poker. He wrote.
Liar's Poker. So I said, wow, I made this deal. It's amazing. I'm pulling it off. And they agreed next morning, signing and so on. So next morning, go to the lawyer's office. All the papers are spread out. So they updated all the papers. The lawyers are swarming around. And the seller is not showing up. And I called the guy up, and so I knew that only the CEO was going to come. He had a power of attorney because the politician was traveling apparently. And the CEO arrives 40 minutes late, and he says that basically, gentlemen, I'm ready to sign this deal on one condition. What? You have to double my salary because I'm going to be part of this international group, and I haven't had a raise so many years. So time out. The buyer kind of takes time to come back 10 minutes. He says, okay, so this is a 51% acquisition, and we are willing to pay for your salary, 51% of your salary increase, like partners, and we are willing to go through with this. And then the CEO says, no, it's not acceptable. What do you mean? Well, my partner is not here. I cannot commit him to a deal in his absence. So you have to pay for the whole salary increase yourself. So at that point, they walked out. They said, no, this is bullshit. Not doing this. So I felt completely crushed. So however, on the high I was the night before, I was totally in the basement, in the crawl space. And the whole weekend, I couldn't get over it. And I couldn't sleep. And Monday morning at 3 a.m. in the morning, I had an idea. I thought, wow. I mean, actually, our fee was going to be more than $1 million here. And I could actually bridge the gap. So if I give up half my fee, I could pay for the 50% of the 50%, and I could make this whole. So I called up the buyer, and they said, yeah, they would still do the deal. So, oh, fantastic. And I'm calling the seller, and they were driving in this politician guy. He had a Maserati, and they were driving in the countryside. And he picked up the phone and he said, Steve, what's going on? And he said, guys, I've got a solution. What is your solution? Well, I can make this thing happen for you. How can you make that? Well, you agreed this is my fee, and I'm going to give it half of it up, and that will make the CEO full, and you don't have to come from your pocket for the next 2 years, and so good. And few seconds silence, and then the prosecutor starts to laugh. What are you laughing? Well, Steve, you didn't really seriously think that we were going to pay your fee? So and what happened was, so the epilogue of this story was that, yes, next year was a pretty good year for them, but then the following year there was a change in government, and their friends fell from grace, so they were not getting the public procurement projects anymore with their companies. The profit started to decline, and in 2011, 4 years later, they went into Chapter 11.
Wow!
And the two owners got indicted for corruption, and they almost went to jail. So suddenly there was another change of government and managed to escape it, get out somehow on a technicality, but they almost went to jail, and they never made the money. They would have made tens of millions of dollars.
Wow.
Because of their greed.
Yeah, they greed, exactly. Greed and hubris. I mean, what a great story to end on. So I want to give you an opportunity. So you've mentioned, thank you. This has been great. You mentioned you've got a book. You mentioned a podcast. Obviously, you got your coaching business. Give people some ways they can find various these resources. If they want to learn more. So
the best way to contact me is go to stevepreda.com. So that's where you can access my book, my podcast. I've got online tools to value your business and to figure out what you want to do with your life through your business and all that stuff. And on Amazon, you can find Buyable, the book. I'm coming up with a new book also later this year. So you can let me know if you'd like to be an early reader. And the podcast is Management Blueprint. So that's also available on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast.
Fantastic, Steve. So my final question on the podcast is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means freedom from all people, from oppression around the world to why I'm an entrepreneur and I haven't had a boss in decades. So what does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
That's such an interesting question. I'm going to respond kind of in real time. I haven't thought about it, but somehow it came in. So I think freedom was for me for many years as well. But I would now say contribution. Mm. So the idea of contributing something, to help other people with what you do, I think it's a huge thing. Most of my clients end up finding some version of that really their company stands for. Helping others, contributing, making a change in the world. And I'm not a millennial, but I'm signing up for this. I think it's a great idea.
I love it. And listen, that is definitely, for me, one of the things that freedom gives me is the ability to choose how and where I want to contribute and be of service. So you and I are definitely very much aligned on that. Steve, thank you very much for being a phenomenal guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Thank you, Corey. Great podcast. You're a great listener, great questions. So I definitely going to sign up for this podcast and listen to the future episodes as well.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.corykupfer.com/dealden. That's corykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.